Hey guys, hi everyone. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I hope I'm audible as well as visible. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, Manash. Walaikum salam, Mir Fazil. Good morning, Sumita, Ankit, Pradnya. Good morning. Good morning. So allow me a second. I will make a post in our WhatsApp group and then we will start our class. Okay. Good morning, Akash. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Said. Good morning. So I can see people are joining. Let them join. We will start in 2 minutes. In the meantime, if we have any questions, if we have any doubts, feel free to ask. Good morning, Gaurav. Good morning. I hope all of you are doing very well. So today we are going to continue the discussion on our life cycle methods. I will try to start from the basics because I have received some queries, some doubts from few students who have said that, sir, this class-based component is somehow a little bit confusing. So we were feeling confident in our React when we were discussing functional components. But suddenly, since you have introduced class-based components, class-based concepts, it looks a little bit confusing. Although we were able to understand what you are trying to say, but still it looks a little bit scary. So we will talk about that as well, and we will make sure that you be comfortable with class-based concepts as well. So that's what our today's class is going to be. Our today's class is going to be making sure that it does not matter what kind of component you use, you should be very much comfortable around both. Okay, although it's very important to understand that mostly 95% times we will use functional components only. Good morning, Pramod, Bharat, Gaurav, Amit, Vishwajit, Rohit. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. So I think we shall start our session now because we have waited 1 or 2 minutes, and unfortunately everyone has not joined. If I remember correctly, we started a poll yesterday, and in that poll, almost 84 students have voted that they are going to be there for the entire session. But unfortunately, I can see only 25 students here. Good morning, Obed. Good morning. So, shall we start, guys? Shall we start? Good morning, Ashu. Good morning. I want every single student to put something in the chat so that we can start with our session. Let me put one last message in the WhatsApp group and then we will start. Shall we start? Perfect. Okay, let's start. Let's start. So, as I said that I have received few of the queries from few students that, sir, we have actually not completely understood class-based components, although we have understood what you have taught, but not entirely. So that's what we are going to understand in today's class. Our agenda will be to completely jump deep down in class based concepts and try to understand what all of these things are. Okay. So let's start. Let's start. See, first of all, you need to understand one very important point. Let's start from the very basics. Okay. Let's leave our things that we have discussed in our last class aside. Let's start from the very basics. What do we mean by a component? Might say, sir, is it mandatory to extra credit? No, no. Over there, if it's mentioned, it's optional, then you can leave it. But if you want to do it, you should definitely give it a try, Amit. Okay. There are only 18 students in the class. Wow. There are only 18 students in the class. That's very unfortunate. So please, if you are comfortable around the last task, if it's optional, you can leave it. But if you want to do it, you can do it. Okay. Let's start. Let's start. So let's first of all understand from the UI or user interface perspective. The agenda is to create web applications user interface. And when we talk about a single piece of UI, we said that's what a component is. Now, when we talk about a React component, a same component can be created by two paradigms, by two ways. Number one is it can be created using functions. Number two is it can be created using classes. As I said, 95% times nowadays we actually use functions to deal with components. To create a proper user interface using React, in 95% times we use functions. Then why are we learning classes? Because there's one very important thing that we need to understand. See, although right now functions are what we use, but you need to understand that there are a lot of concepts related to class-based components which you can understand only if you read and understand them via classes. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? The agenda is to actually switch to functions entirely. But the point is, when we talk about some very important concepts, recently I gave one of the interviews in web development, and there were two questions that were asked in class-based concepts, which we will discuss in today's class. And it was a senior React interview. It was not like a fresh React interview. So there were two questions from this. One we already discussed in our previous class. He explained what super is, what super method is, which we explained in our last class. We have already discussed this. Now, what is the next question, which we will discuss in today's class? So that's why we are learning classes, because there are some very basic and some very important concepts that we have to understand. Now, when we say classes, we simply understand that when we talk about our React already has a component within itself. React already has a component within itself. It's already created in React. And when we talk about this component, React already knows how a component should look like. Like, for example, if you ask me, leave classes aside, leave yesterday's class aside. Let's talk about until then. If I ask you, hey, explain in a React component what should be there, you will say, sir, at least there should be a state. At least there should be a prop, right? Good morning, Soumya. Good morning, Arka. So when you as a common user look at the React component, you will say there should be at least these two things. And a lot of other things as well. But at least you will say, no, sir, props should be there. Yes, sir, state should be there. Similarly, when we talk about our React has a picture of component. React knows what a component should look like. And React already has that within itself. And that's what this component is. Now, think about this. We build houses. Do we build houses? Yes, right? We build houses. And you might have seen a lot of Hollywood movies that there is a colony of same house everywhere. Exactly same houses everywhere. Yes, of course we see, right? Now the question is, do you think if I am living in that colony and I have to build exactly the same house, do you think I will hire the engineer again and ask him to draw the entire naksha again? Draw the entire map of this entire house again? No. But what I will do is, I already know that there's already a map created for this colony because they are following the same pattern. So I will simply use the same map. I will use the same naksha to create my house, to create my component. Does it make sense? Does it make sense? So that's where we say that since React knows what a component looks like, if I have to create any particular component, I will simply tell it, hey, give me this component. So I will inherit everything from him and then maybe include my own things as well. So React already knows what a component looks like. If I have to now create a component, maybe about component, maybe blogs component, maybe profile component, maybe dashboard component, I know in every component, these are the things that I will definitely use. Whether it's a normal prop, whether it's a state, whether it's any lifecycle method, I know I'm going to use them. So over here, I simply tell it, instead of doing all that work again, give me all of those things. So I will inherit my component from the React component that we have. So React already has a class, and that class is component. As we know, class is nothing but a blueprint. So we simply inherit our own component from it. So if we have to create our own component, let's suppose I have to create a dashboard. So I will simply tell it, hey, create a class dashboard. Now, this is a normal class, but I know it has to inherit parent things. It has to inherit a lot of methods from the parent. So we simply use a keyword called as extends. Extends what? Extends component. It simply means the inherit from component. So if this dashboard, whatever properties this component has, I simply want you to inherit them in the dashboard as well. That's what class-based component is. That's what this line of code means. If you see over here in our previous class, we actually created the same thing. We created our own component, component1, which was extends from the component. That is actually what we call as component of React. I hope until now everything makes sense. If please make sure you like this video right now. Moving a little bit forward. Now, I'm not going to have a lot of discussion around class-based concepts because, as I said, we will use functional components. But there is something which we discussed in our previous class. Quickly, let's revise that. There is phases. We understood that whenever we talk about a React component, whenever we talk about a component can possibly go through three phases. What are those three phases, guys? Quickly tell me in the chat, what are those three phases? Number one is we have mounting. Number two phase that we talked about was updation. Number three phase that we talked about was unmounting. Now, this particular phase, three phases, it's not just limited to class-based concepts. It's limited to component. Whether it's a functional component or a class-based component, it's for a React component. We know what mounting is. What's a mounting, guys? That when a component is displayed, rendered first time, when it becomes first time part of the DOM, at that point of time, we say component has been mounted. And when it is updated, whenever we do a change in state so that it will re-render itself with new set of data, in that particular case, we say it is updation. And when do we say it's unmounted? When we remove it, we do conditional rendering. We remove the component from the DOM tree, we say component has been unmounted. Now, since this mounting is not an instance of time, this updation is not an instance of time, this unmounting is not an instance of time, we understood in our previous class, it is a time interval. It's a phase of time, which means that when we talk about mounting, when component is loaded first time in the DOM tree, until you do the updation, until you make the dynamicality change inside your web application, until then we say component is still in mounting phase. Then when you do the change in state, after that you continuously do the changes, you continuously re-render that starting of the updation and the ending of the updation until it's removed from the DOM. That whole phase is called the updation phase. And finally, unmounting is when we remove the element. And in this lifespan, in our class-based concepts, there are some methods. So in mounting, we discussed, although we had not discussed the entire methods, but yes, we discussed constructor. So what is constructor? Constructor is a method that automatically executes as soon as we create instance of it, and it is used to define properties, and it's used to define a lot of other things which we discussed in our previous class. Second method that we discussed, or not discussed, but we mentioned, was get static derived. What is this? Static get derived state from props. Let me try to rephrase this. Static get derived state from props. This is one of the very important method, although there's one discussion that we need to do around it, which we will do. Third method in mounting was our render. And fourth method, which we actually mentioned in our last class, was componentDidMount. Now, what are these lifecycle methods? What are these methods? These methods have a specific meaning associated with them. These methods have a very specific meaning associated with them, which is that if you implement this method, this method, this method, this method in a class-based component, you don't have to call them. They will automatically be called as soon as mounting is invoked. As soon as mounting happens, first time it's loaded in the DOM tree, constructor will be the first method that will automatically execute itself. Second method, third method, fourth method. So this is also a question to freshers. Hey, give me the order of execution. How does lifecycle method execute? What is the order of execution? In which order they will be executed? In mounting phase. Second thing which we discussed was updation. In this, we discussed that if I do a change in state, my component can go in updation phase. Now, over here, the method is, first of all, get derived state from props. Second method which we discussed was, not discussed, actually mentioned, shouldComponentUpdate. Now, this is one of the questions that was asked to me. This question was asked to me. Explain shouldComponentUpdate. Give me an example of what does it do? Why is it too much important? This question was second question that was asked to me in and React interview lately. I mean 2 weeks ago. Number one question was in class-based component, what's a super method? So write it down. It's a very important method. Ask it definitely. Even if you don't know class-based components, super method will be asked at 90% time. The second question was this should component update. Third method over there is render, and fourth method over there is component will update. Now these are the lifecycle methods which we are going to understand in today's class. Now there's one very small thing. I have a small suggestion. Okay, it's completely up to you. See, we are right now discussing class-based components, and I'm pretty much sure that there are few students who are not entirely comfortable around it. But as I said, it will be one class session. After that, we will completely shift back to functional components, and we will start properly functional components. Now, do you want me to teach you exactly what these methods are supposed to do, or do you just want me to teach you from the lifecycle method perspective? Quickly tell me in the chat. Do we want to learn these methods properly? Like you can answer them in interviews, what they are supposed to do one by one, or do you just want me to teach you from the okay, let's just see what these methods are? That's it. Not completely. In detail. Shall we discuss in detail? Let's discuss them in detail. Details, let's discuss them in details. So I will go here and I will first of all close this component, and let me close everything here, and I will simply try to create a new component. In class component, I will create a new component. What's the component name? Sir, properly we have let's discuss all of these methods properly. But in that case, you have to be very much attentive, because this is something that you have to connect the dots properly. Okay, so make sure you understand it properly. So I will create a method with the name of lifecycle.js. Okay, and I know it's a class-based component, so let me create RCC. Now after that, I will simply call this in app.js. So let me remove this. So Control A, let me remove RFC. You can make this functional component or even class-based component as well. Who cares about that? So let me create lifecycle like this. And after that, I will simply go here, npm start. So let's wait for the output. In the meantime, let's go back. Now we are here to discuss lifecycle methods. If you look at our table that we created, the first method is constructor. Now, what's a constructor method? I think we have already discussed this in our previous class. So inside our web application, inside our class-based component, as soon as we create class, we assign constructor to it. Now, even leave constructor method with respect to our classes aside. We have discussed in our JavaScript constructors as well, new keyword. So constructors are automatically executed as soon as you create instance of it. Over here, we use it to define properties, to define methods, bind things with it, and so on and so forth, which we discussed in our last class. So constructor is already discussed. The first method that we are going to discuss is our, what is it called? Get derived state from props. So pay close attention. First of all, as the name says, static get derived state from props. You can see how big the name is. So this is a method that we actually have, static get derived state from props. What is this method supposed to do? Let's understand it. As the name says, I am going to derive state based on the props. That's the definition. As the name says, I am going to derive state based on the change of the props that this component is going to receive. But for that, we have to first of all create the state. So for that, we will use constructor method. So let me quickly go here, define a constructor like this, in which the first thing that we have to do is we have to use super method. Then I will define a state. So this dot state is equals to, and let me define two states maybe this time. So count is equals to 0, comma. I will go and say color over here is equals to, let's say by default, it's going to be red. Simple state I have defined. Now a simple question. As the name says, get derived state from props. Before that, let me do one thing. Let me mention one another method. So component did mount like this, in which I will simply go say console.log component did mount. After that, I'm going to go here inside this constructor console.log. I'm going to say constructor. After that, I'm going to go inside get derived state from props. I will simply say get derived state from props. Then finally, over inside this render, I'm going to say console.log. I'm going to say render. Look at this. If you look at this particular code that I actually have mentioned here, I have implemented 4 lifecycle methods. Number 1 is constructor. Number 2 is static get derived state from props. Number 3 is render. Number 4 is componentDidMount. And if I go right now to the output, let me go to the inspect. And if I go to console, do you see as soon as I refresh the page, can I say component will be mounted? Of course. As soon as I refresh my page, component will be mounted. So when I refresh my page, do you see the order of execution? The first method that's executed is constructor. Second method is automatically executed over the get derived state from props. Third method is render. Fourth method is componentDidMount. So if 4 methods are mentioned like this, the order of execution is going to be this. So with this particular output, can I say even before rendering in the output, constructor and get derived state from props is already executed? Yes or no? Can we say that even before executing, even before displaying, even before rendering the output, we have methods that are going to execute themselves? For example, in this case, constructor and get derived state from props. I hope that makes sense. Moving a little bit forward. Now see, as of now, we have understood the basic question that what is the order of execution, and please note it down. But what is this method supposed to do? This particular method. Then I will come to this and I will come to this. As the name says, static get derived state from props. It receives 2 arguments. How many arguments does it receive? 2. Number 1 is props, comma, number 2 is state. Let's try to find out what these 2 things are. So let me simply say props over here, then comma, state. I want to see what these 2 are. I am calling this lifecycle component over here. Do you see I am passing any prop to it? Of course not. I'm not passing any prop to it. But let me say I am going to pass a prop which is first name at this point of time. First name is equals to, let's suppose, Adfar. So now, of course, this is receiving a prop and there is a state. And if I right now go to my output, you can clearly see as soon as I refresh my page, now there are 2 objects in the output. So number 1 is the props object. Number 2 is the state object. Number 1 is the props object, first name Adfar. Number 2 is count 0, color red. And if I go, that's what I have printed. So can I say that this method actually is able to capture props and state inside its arguments? Of course, yes. So if we talk about get derived state from props, it receives 2 arguments, current props, current state, whatever the current prop and current state is. Now, what is it supposed to do? It is always supposed to return state. So the first definition should be that get derived state from props is going to return a state. But what state is it going to return? The updated state. So maybe I want simply that over here, please update a specific state, make the color, because color is a state, make the state over there as this dot props dot color. Although I have not mentioned color prop, but let me mention color prop here. So let me simply go say color is equals to, let's suppose blue. So over here, what I have done, before it renders, at this point of time, let's suppose I will simply go implement a style. Now in this style, I will pass the background color property. And let's suppose this background color property is this dot state dot color. Now if you guys tell me, according to the state that I have, what is the color, initial state of color? It's red, right? Let me try to comment this, or let me try to cut it out. If I go right now to the output, you can clearly see there's a background color red. But now, as soon as I execute this method over there, we can clearly see, even before rendering what it has done, it has updated my state over there. It says cannot read the property this dot props. Why is that? It says this dot props is not. Because props is directly an object. Why will we use this over here? So props dot color. And now if I go, you can clearly see it's below. So what has happened? What has happened? Even before executing the render method for mounting, even though whatever our initial state was, it has actually overwritten that based on the change of the props. Now you will ask a simple question. There's a wonderful question that you can ask. And even this was asked to me in one of the classes. And I love this question. Sir, you told me that this static get derived state from props is going to be executed before render. And the whole agenda of this, this particular method is that it will be executed before render and it's going to update my state. And at this point of time, I'm updating the state based on the prop, which is color. and my color is below here. So since I know it's going to be executed before render, why don't I simply initialize my color with below? Well, what's the need of it? Because I know initial state won't be there, so it will update it based on the color. So why won't I directly start it with the below? Because that's what the whole agenda was. Can anyone give me an answer to that? Like, why can't we do that? Although we can, but why can't? Like, what is the necessity of get derived state from props? There's one very important point. One very important point. Get derived state method is not just a part of mounting. This get derived state is also a part of updation, which means that this method won't be just called in mounting phase, but it will be also called in the updation phase as well. This is what I mean. Maybe our requirement is that I simply want that every single time this color should depend on the change of a prop called as color. Now, can I make a value of this color itself a state? Which means it can I make it have a changing behavior? Yes or no? Okay, of course I can, right? Maybe over here I will define a state, and with that state I will always maybe have a click over here, 5-6 clicks that will send the color as in one case blue, in another case red, in another case pink, in another case yellow, so on and so forth. And I want that when I do that, whatever this is, it should automatically make sure it will update the color state. You got your answer. So that's why this method is very tricky, very important, because we want that before render, it should actually update my state based on the change of the props it's going to receive. Do we have any questions with respect to this method? Do we understand why we need this method? Yes or no? I want everyone to answer in the chat, every single person. Quickly. Very good. Moving forward. Although I don't see any yeses in the chat. Am I audible? Got it, guys? I cannot see people typing. Perfect. Okay, moving forward. So we understood what this method is. I will come back to this method in a second. Let me go here. Let me define a button. And that button is simply going to say count. Plus. And on this, I'm simply going to have an on-click method. And on this on-click, I will simply go and tell it, please update my state. So this dot set state. What is it going to update it with? An object which is count, and that is going to update it by this dot state dot count plus 1. Why am I doing this? Because I want that this particular component should go in updation phase. At this point of time, I have constructor method, I have static method, I have componentDidMount, I have render mount. And if I go right now to the output, let's refresh our page. As soon as I refresh our page, you can see constructor being called, get derived state being called, render being called, componentDidMount. But when I again click on this, let's see which method will be called. If I again click this, you can clearly see get derived state from props is again called. If you see get derived state from props is again called. That's why I said that this method is not just a part of this mounting, but it's also part of updation. It will be called at 2 instances, when component is mounted, when component is updated, in both instances. Remember that. Are you able to understand now why this method is very important? Like why we need to update our state? Because this can be changing in nature. And when it changes, we want it to affect the state over here. And if we want that method in class-based components is get derived state from props. When we want to update our state based on the change in the props, in that case, this method plays a very important role. So let me comment this. After that, there's another method called as a render. Now, what is this render? Render is a method that will simply allow you to render things in the output. Simple thing. Like we want to display a content. We want to display proper JSX. To render JSX in the output, we have this Lifecycle method. You already know this. But what does this componentDidMount do? At this point of time, you need to understand componentDidMount over there is the most important method. Most important method. Doesn't matter whether it's asked in the interviews or not. But in this whole scenario, in this whole method, in this whole lifecycle scenario, even in functional component as well, there's a way of componentDidMount. The most important method is componentDidMount. Unfortunately, we won't see the real implementation of it. Why? Because we have to discuss something else first in functional components, then we will discuss componentDidMount here. But still, let me tell you what it is. We know that it will be executed after render in mounting. After render, it will be updated and executed over here. It is used to perform side effects. Although there's no term as side effects, we use it in React side effects continuously, but there's nothing called as side effects. There's something else that we say as side effects, which we will understand in today's class. But from the broader perspective, side effects mean creating timers, doing DOM manipulation, performing fetch requests, fetching APIs, all those things. That's what is done over here. For example, I will simply go say set interval or set, I will simply create a timer. So set interval like this. And we know it's going to receive a callback function like this, like this, like this. While it's simply supposed to console.log maybe at the first. And let me go here. Let me simply say after 1,000. If I now go to the output, you can see adfer being called, although let me refresh my page. If I refresh my page, adfer after every second, adfer is being called. So at this point of time, you just remember that componentDidMount is a lifecycle method which should be executed after render. But I will definitely come back to this in today's class itself. Not probably today, but in next class, okay? Because we have discussed something else in functional components. But maybe from the lifecycle method, you understood. Now tell me, why are they called a lifecycle? Am I calling them anywhere? No, because you need to understand they are called a lifecycle method only for one condition. Because as soon as their phase comes up, they will automatically be executed. So you do not execute them, you do not call them. They are automatically executed. That's why they are called a lifecycle. Now, another very important lifecycle. Now, we have discussed all the life cycles in mounting. We will discuss another life cycles in updation. Number one method is shouldComponentUpdate. Now, this is something which was asked to me in interviews. What is this supposed to do? shouldComponentUpdate, what is it supposed to do? Similar to getDerivedState from props, shouldComponentUpdate also receives two arguments. But those two arguments are called next props. Next props, you can name them anything, but they define next props and next state. What do we mean by that? Let me tell you. I will simply go say console.log next props, comma, next state. And let's try to see what they are. First question over here, if I refresh my page, will shouldComponentUpdate be called? No. Why? Because it's an updation phase. So we have to perform the updation here to call it. And if I click on this, at that point of time, I know component will go in updation phase. So when I click on this, we can clearly see props is what it receives in next props. So this will be simply the props that it's receiving from the parent. And another thing over there will be the state itself, which is next state. So count one, color red. Now you will say, sir, why is it next state? No, it's a current state. I will tell you why it's next state. If I go to the render over here, you can clearly see over here also, if I refresh my page, let me go back to console where I was. Let me remove this and let me simply click on console pulse. It says it should return. Okay, let's leave this error aside. You can clearly see it's count one. Let me tell it to return true as of now. Okay, because that's the error it's giving me. So I will tell it to return true. What does it mean? What does it signify? I will tell it in a second. Now leave this. Let me click on count plus plus. So when I click on count plus plus, please pay attention over here. Do you think the first method in updation state is being called as shouldComponentUpdate then render? shouldComponentUpdate then render? Yes or no? So first method is shouldComponentUpdate then render is being called. So even before displaying the updated state, you already have the updated state. What is the next state? Next state is going to be 4 if I click on this. So when I click on this, it gives me 4 pehle before rendering. That's why it's called next state, next props. But what is this method supposed to do? It's supposed to return Boolean value. It will either return true or it will return false. Over here, I will simply create a h1. And in that h1, I will simply try to display this dot state dot count. Sometimes we have some restrictions in our web application. You might have seen a lot of restrictions in your web application. Maybe one of the restriction is, maybe you see in games especially, that when you score 10, simply give me an alert, say level 1 is concluded, something like that. You implement boundaries. You simply say, when my avatar simply touches the wall at that point of time, simply say game ended, something like that. Or you simply have a counter going on, you click, you tell it after 10, do not allow the counting part, do not allow the increase in the count. At this point of time, you can clearly see, I am able to see every single time It is counting every single time perfectly. It's allowing the update. Why? Because my component returns true. But what if it returns false? What if it returns false? Should component update returns boolean always? It will either return true or it will return false. It cannot return anything else. If it returns true, it means whatever lifecycle methods are after that in in this updation phase that are in queue, it will not execute them. It will not execute render. It will not execute component update after that, because those are the methods that are supposed to be executed after component update. If it returns false, if it returns true, it means whatever lifecycle methods are there after that, execute them properly. At this point of time, since it returns false, we can clearly go over it. Let me click on this. Pay attention. State is being updated. Count is 1. But do you think it's allowing a render method to execute itself? No. State becomes 14 over there. My state properly is updated. It does not mean do not update the state. No, state is updated. But the lifecycle method with help of which we are getting our output, which is render, it won't execute them. It won't execute any method after that. That's what this should component update is. As the name says, should I allow this component to update, to display the render output, to display the output, updated output? I won't if it returns false. So note it down on your rough copy. The should component update returns boolean. If it returns true, all the lifecycle methods that are queued after that, they will be executed. If it returns false, all the lifecycle methods that are queued after that, it won't execute it. But why is it required? You will see, sir. Simple thing is, if I return false, it means my component won't be updated. So if it is not updated, I will not create the updation part phase here. I know it won't update, it won't render. So why am I writing count plus plus? Because it's not just about directly return false. It's actually about implementing conditional false conditional to. I will simply tell it if my next state dot count is equals to 10. When it becomes 10, or when it is greater than 15, or when it is greater than 100, or whatever our conditions, whatever our requirement is, if that is happening, at that point of time, please tell this function to return false. Otherwise, go there and tell it to return true. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Can you tell me, according to this particular definition, at what point it will not allow my component to update itself? At what point? When my state dot count is equals to 10. After that, or at that point, not after that, but at that point of time, it won't allow my components to actually execute rest of the updation lifecycle methods. At this point of time, if I go here, properly works over here. Now, when I click on this, next state becomes count becomes 9. So 9 is here. But when I click on it, it is not allowing 10. But tell me one thing, if I again click on it, if I again click on this, will it allow change? Simple question. Because we are discussing lifecycle methods, I will get back to functional component Basu in today's class itself. In 10-20 minutes, I will get back to functional components. Don't worry about it. I understand, but you have to watch last class video. So if I can click on it, will it allow me to update? That's what my question is. What do you think? Think about it. Think about this scenario. Think about the condition I have implemented. When my next state dot count is equals 10, return false. Otherwise, return true. So if I again click on it, what will be the next state dot count? It will be 11. So of course, 11 pe dikhayega. For 11, it will be visible. The point is, when it is 10, don't display it. When it is 10, don't display it. So I can simply implement greater or equal to 10. In that case, the requirement that we had, we are supposed to implement greater or equal to. But equals to means only one instance. So when I click on this, it does not matter how many times I click. Now there won't be any change. Yes, 11 pay, it will return true. Because that's what our coding was supposed to do. It was doing that. Do you understand now the requirement of should component update and why it's too important? Do we understand this? Do we understand this? Yes or no? Every single person, please reply and make sure you like this video right now. Do we have any questions, guys? I want everyone. I don't know why students are not typing anything in the chat today. What is the reason behind that? Am I clear with this? Perfect. moving a little bit forward. Now let me try to uncomment this. Okay. And let me remove this over here. So I will simply say get derived state from props. After that, let me put this in a string. So let me remove this as well. And let me simply put it in a string as well. Done. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to see the order of execution in my updation. So let me click on this. You can clearly see the first method is get derived state from props. Second method is shouldComponentUpdate. Third method is render. So it means that if you do not want to render something after a certain kind, very good. In those situations when there is a condition based updation we want, in that particular case, this is why I'm going to use shouldComponentUpdate. Okay, perfectly explained. Now moving a little bit forward, let me try to comment this. Render is same, so render is similar for our updation as well. Whatever change has happened in updation, now render them. So that's what render is for. Now there's one last method which is called componentDidMount. Also very important method. Now if you remember guys, if you have a good memory, this method, which is get derived state from props, it receives two arguments: current props at that point of time and current state. This receives two arguments: next props, since it is doing the updation, what are going to be the next props and what are going to be the next state. It's about that. Third particular method which we have, component update, it also receives two arguments. Now those two arguments are previous props and previous state. Since component has updated, I know that this component update is a lifecycle method which will be executed at the end of updation phase. But at the end, if you are concerned about what the previous prop was, what the previous state was, and based on that you want to do something, in that particular case we have component update. It's not, trust me, component update is not just about executing some logic, but executing a logic based on what the previous props could have been, based on what the previous state could have been. Let's try to see. Let me try to do one thing. I will simply try to uncomment this, and let me remove the double quotes out of this. Sorry, double quotes here, double quotes here. So it can print next. Over here, I will simply go say console.log my previous props and my previous state. See, and pay close attention what's happening. If I refresh my page, let me remove and clear my console. When I click on this, this is my next state, because that's what is going to be my next state before render. Count one, color red. But even after displaying the updated state, I still have hold of previous state and previous props. Do you understand? So that is the beauty of class-based component, that you are able to access everything. Next state, previous state, current state. Next props, previous props, current props. That's the beauty of lifecycle methods, because they actually track the life cycle of a component, how this life cycle goes for this particular component. Am I clear? Now, sir, okay, we understood that I am able to access previous props, even if it has updated it, I am able to access it. But what is the necessity of it? The necessity is simple. Based on what my next state is going to be, I am telling you to do something. Similarly, based on something, do something. Based on previous prop, do something. Now, over here, I am simply limited that whether it will update the component or not. Over here, I'm not limited. Over here, I can do some task. I will tell you why we need. Let's suppose I have a state. Let me tell you why we need. That's why I'm going. Let's suppose I have a state, and that state is status. Status is equals to, by default at this point of time, it's empty. It's empty. Now over here, I will simply implement one small thing, which is h1. Maybe I'm creating something, and over here I want to display this status. This dot status dot this dot state dot status. Now over here, I will simply go and implement a small condition, small, very basic condition, that if my priv state dot count is equals to 9 or is equals 8, since I am implementing shouldComponentUpdate, so let me keep it 8. At that point of time, please do one thing, which is this dot set state. At that point of time, update my status with what? With simply congratulations you have completed level 1. What are we doing? That when my previous state was 8, at that point of time, please implement update my state with congratulations, you have completed level 1, or congratulations, you have won, congratulations, do this, or whatever the requirement is. You understand the funda behind this. So now if I go here, let me refresh the page. I will click on this. Next state is 1, previous state is 0. Moving forward, next state 2, previous state 1. Moving forward over here. So when I again execute it, next state is 8, previous state is 7. And if I simply click on this, at that point of time, my previous state is 8, and we have actually done something. So based on previous state, what my previous state could have been, do this. And we completed, we gave a message, we actually execute a state, and we can do any dynamicality, what you can think of. So I hope component did update is also clear. Is it clear, guys? Is it clear? Is it clear? Every single person, because I'm going to move forward now to functional component. We have completed lifecycle methods. Now a simple question. If anyone asks you what does shouldComponentUpdate do, you should be able to answer, irrespective of whether you know class-based concepts or not, whether you know class-based components or not. If anyone asks you what's a super method, you should know what it is. If anyone asks you, hey, what does componentUpdate do, you should know what actually it's supposed to do. Right? Component will unmount is simply, if component is unmounted, it will be executed. Maybe you want to display, here I am moving this component. That's a simple thing, right? As the name itself says. We don't really talk about component will unmount that much, right? Because it's not used that much. But these methods are very important. Component will unmount. If component is moved, unmounted, do this. Okay, now a conclusion to whole class-based concepts. And let me put a message in WhatsApp group, because now I am going to start one of the most important concepts inside our functional component called as useEffect. This is something very important. So we are starting useEffect hook. Please join. Think about this. Until now, from our last class until now, we have been focusing on one very important scenarios, which is that every component goes through 3 phases. We call them as mounting, we call them as updation, we call them as unmounting. I will talk about that. Now, when we talk about these phases, we understood that in these phases, we want sometimes to execute some logic. Let me give you a simple example. I will go on a website called as Amazon.in. Okay, Amazon.in. Simple website in front of you. Although it's not single page application, but I'm giving a little bit of idea of what's happening over here. I have a simple question to ask you. Do you think that these people have actually designed these cards one by one? But by that, I mean, like they have created this page, then they have created this card, then this card, then this card. No, right? There is a data in the backend. They are simply making sure that when the page is refreshed, I will make a request to the database. I have I have implemented a CSS, and then I'm simply going to fetch it and do something. But when I'm fetching data, don't you think I am fetching data immediately when I'm going on this particular web application? Which means when this application is mounted, so there is requirement that we want that as soon as my application is loaded, do something, fetch the APIs, start the timer, or do whatever. But initially, as soon as it's loaded, without us performing any action, clicking on somewhere, do this action. That's what mounting things mean. Another very important thing. When I go here, I will search laptop. Now, when I am searching laptop, don't you think it's doing something? So we have to implement something that whenever there's a change inside the search field, do something. So this is something that you need to understand, that going through phases, and based on what the phases, do something. This becomes very important. And fortunately, inside our class-based components, we have everything inbuilt. We have everything that is part of this component, where from we are inheriting things. So we have our state here. We have a proper way of updating our state, which is this.set state. We have proper lifecycle methods. Everything is already defined. To tackle the same thing inside our functional components, we have a concept, and that is called hook. We have React hooks, a very important concept. Now we are going back to functional component. We are going to discuss one of the most important hooks inside React called as useEffect in today's class. And I'm pretty much sure it's going to take 2 classes at least. Functional component. As we discussed that in class-based component, everything is there. Everything is there, almost. Now we need the same functionality now in our functional components as well. We need state. We need a way of updating state. We need a way of doing something in the mounting. We need a way of doing something in the updation. So it means that there was something inside our class-based components, some concepts. Now the same concepts we want to hook with functional components. Hook means bandhna. Yes or no? So that will hook something. So we want those concepts to be hooked to our functional component. For that, there's a concept called as React hooks. That's why the name hook comes from. We want to hook state with our functional component. We want to hook lifecycle methods with the functional component. And many more. Now, there is something within class-based components. There is something in functional component which we do not have in class-based component. So hooks actually opened a new world to us. They allowed us that, okay, I can design a hook and this is what it's going to do. And you create a hook only once, now you simply import it. You simply import it. Have we discussed already something which is already part of class-based components? By we use a method for it in our functional component? Yes. We have discussed useState. useState is a hook. Why is it a hook? Because it allows you to hook state with your functional component. It allows you to hook state with your functional component. That's why the name hook. Another very important thing, if you have to identify any hook, always remember React hooks have a prefix use. Any method that starts with use and then whatever the method name is, they are called React hooks. One of them is useState. So useState is a hook that allows you to hook a proper concept of class-based component state with the functional component. Similarly, this is one of the most important hooks that we have in history of React, and that hook is called useEffect. useEffect. Now let's understand this useEffect. Shall we start useEffect? And I am pretty much sure that there are some students who already know useEffect. You will still learn a lot of new things, and I can guarantee you that. So laptop battery kharab, please repeat hook. Okay. Let's talk about hooks again. Quickly, very quickly. We know that inside our class-based components, there are concepts already inbuilt. State. There's state that we have. There's lifecycle methods that we have, because that's our need. Now, what if we want same functionalities inside our functional component? So we need something that will hook those concepts that we have in class-based components with the functional component. That's why React hooks comes in place, because they allow you to hook something. Hook means bandhna. So they allows you to merge, they allow you to wrap these concepts that we have in class-based components inside our functional component, whether it's our state or whether it's our lifecycle methods. So those are called hooks, React hooks. Another thing, they will always have a prefix use, and we have already discussed one of the hook called as useState. I hope now you have understood what we mean by React hooks. Okay, moving forward, and let's discuss, as I said, one of the most important hooks inside our React, and this hook is called useEffect. There are multiple definitions to it. What this useEffect hook is going to do. Some people say that it is used to perform side effects. Other people say that it's used to eliminate those side effects. Very good. Both our definitions are correct. I will talk about what side effects are. Some people say it's used to perform lifecycle methods. Few of them. Very good. Other people say that useEffect hook is a hook which will allow you to communicate with the external world. Very good. But all of these definitions are proper, and I will explain you all of these. What is the syntax of useEffect hook before we jump what it is? useEffect hook is simply a method which is not going to return anything, although it will return something, but it is simply, it receives two arguments. Number one is a callback function. Number second is dependency and dependency array. Let's understand what it is in functional component. Okay. So I will go here and I will cut this whole component out and I will simply see RFC, in which I'm simply going to have an useEffect hook. And over here, I will simply pass a callback function as an argument. And this callback function is simply going to say console.log. It's simply going to say effect. So it needs a dependency array. At this point of time, we can clearly see that in this useEffect hook, I have to import it from React. If you want to use any hook, you have to import it. Always remember this. I am passing only one function here. I'm not passing any other argument. If you see, the syntax is very simple, that it is going to receive second argument, but this is optional in case. Okay, this is mandatory callback function, what it will do, but this is optional. Okay, but if I do not pass second argument over there, let's understand what it is going to do. For that, to understand it properly, I will define a state. So constant count comma set my count is equals to, I will use use state like this over here, and initially I will make it 0. After that, I'm simply going to say one thing. I'm going to say h1, which will display my count, and then over here I will define a button. So now this button is simply going to say plus plus plus, and over here I will simply have an on click event, and this on click event will call a function called as handle increment. And there's one other question, one very important question, interview question, which I also have been asked multiple times, which I have also asked multiple times to a lot of people, a lot of students, because this gives you an idea of the real implementation of, what is this called, React, like whether you understood React JavaScript or not. So I will simply go tell it to set my count with count plus 1. And at this point of time, if I go right now to my web application, we can clearly see it's properly working, right? Ignore this effect in the output, but I have a question. I have called my handle increment like this. What if I put a bracket in front of it? Do you think it will work? This is how we call our functions now. If I put a bracket in front of this, will it work? Will it work? No, it won't. It will give you an error. And that error is infinite re-rendering, something like that. So if I go here, you can see React limits the number of renders to prevent an infinite loop. Now, why is this case? Why is this case? Why is it giving me this particular error? That's something, that's one of the best interview questions. And this is not how it's asked. People say, hey, tell me, explain me that, infinite loop rendering. What does that mean? That's the question. Infinite loop rendering. Explain that. This is what's happening behind the scenes. We know that from our state discussion, we know state is doing two things always. Number one is it persists the value between multiple renders. Number two is it has a method set count or set state within itself that will trigger a re-render. Yes or no? So this method that we have, it triggers a re-render. Perfectly fine. Now, when you directly put a method function like this, it means call it immediately. Without waiting for click, call it immediately. So now when this is mounted, it will call this particular function immediately. And when it calls it immediately, it is going to execute this. And when it executes this, it will trigger a re-render. Now, since it executes this whole code again, it will again call it. It will again go here. This will again trigger re-render. It will again call it. It will again go here. It will again trigger re-render. So that's why infinite loop is happening. Because this is calling this, then this is triggering the re-render, and it again calls this particular function. Am I clear? This is what we mean by infinite loop rendering. So that's why we cannot call a function like this. Even if it receives argument, it does not matter. Now, how can we call function like this? In that particular case, put it in a callback function like this. But not callback function, but function like this. And call it like this. You can make it work like this. Okay? This is one of the very important good questions. One of the important questions. Now it will work properly fine. Okay, I hope this makes sense. This is one of the questions that I forgot in one of the classes. So if we don't define set state, it will not call. So why would it cause in that case? And why will you have a function here if it's not about this, right? That does not make any sense. So let's move forward. Now let me get back to this function, and even let me remove this function, whole function here, because it's not about this function. It's about the state update. So let me call my state update like this. So set my count to count plus 1. Now let's pay attention. And now, but we are using, but that's not how it works now. Since you have immediately invoked it, you have put bracket directly. It means call it. When you don't put bracket in front of it, then if you click, it will be called immediately. Bracket means immediately invoke it in React in this case. Right? That's something important. Now let's pay close attention here before I move forward to something else. Right now, I have a use effect hook. And if I go in the output, I know my component will be mounted, because when my component is first time displayed in DOM, it will be, what is this called? Mounted. Said, I understand what you're trying to say. But if you do put brackets in front of it, it means immediately invoke it without waiting for it. Will read the whole code. So JavaScript will actually, in this case, execute it without on click. If you don't put bracket, on click means put brackets now and then call it. Do you understand that? I hope that makes sense. If it does not, I will get back to it in 5 minutes after the break. Please allow me some time, because I'm trying to discuss something else here. So let's pay attention. Can I say that if I go in the output, as soon as I refresh my page, my component will be mounted? Can I say that? Of course, yes. And then if I click on this, my component will be updated every single time. It's going into updation phase again and again. Yes. Now, do you see anywhere I have called this use effect hook on any on click or any function? No, I have not called it. But if I right now go in the output and if I refresh my page, if I go into console, since I have told it to console the effect, you can clearly see effect there. Whenever I refresh my page, my use effects callback function will automatically be executed in mounting phase. So can we say it's a lifecycle method right now? Because it's automatically triggering the callback function it has in mounting. So can we say it's a lifecycle? It is executing a lifecycle which is componentDidMount. componentDidMount. Remember componentDidMount? How was componentDidMount executing? In the mounting phase as soon as my output is displayed. Similarly, since I have passed a callback function over here, ignore what this callback function is doing. At this point of time, it's simply consoling effect in the output. But when is this callback function being executed? Whenever my component is mounted. So whenever my component is mounted over the effect is being called again and again. So the first thing is that whenever the first note it down on your rough copy, if I am using use effect, then I will pass a callback function. Inside this callback function, whatever logic I want to execute. And if I don't pass any dependency, no second argument, no dependency, in that particular case, you need to understand this logic will be executed. It behaves exactly as componentDidMount. This logic will be executed every single time when it is mounting. That's first thing. Second thing is, now let's bring the dynamicality in it. Let's bring the updation phase. If I click on this, you can clearly see this method is called again. If I click on this method is called again. If I click on this method is called again. Which means if I don't pass the second argument, there's no dependency. It just does not behave only with componentDidMount, but also it behaves with componentDidUpdate as well. Which means every single time, whenever this component will go in updation phase, the logic will be executed again and again. When the page renders and when the page re-renders. When the component renders first time and when the component re-renders again and again. In that particular case, it will be called again and again. So as of now, the definition of use effect I am trying to make you understand is with respect to lifecycle methods. Then we talk about these communicating with external and side effects. I hope this makes sense. Now the second syntax. Second syntax is I will pass second argument to it. So second argument is whatever logic it's trying to execute, let it do that. And second argument is an array. But I will pass it as an empty array. What this array represents, I will talk about that as well. But at this point of time, let me pass empty array. It's called a dependency array. Dependency array. Now, what does that mean? We will talk about that. If I refresh my page, can I still see effect, guys? Can I still see effect? Can I still say that even if I pass the second dependency as an empty array, in that particular case as well, it behaves like componentDidMount? Yes, it behaves like componentDidMount. did mount. So there's no change with respect to that, even if I put empty dependency. So this is when I put empty dependency. Moving forward. But in this particular case, if I right now go to my web application and if I again bring updation phase, continuously bring updation phase, you can clearly see now it does not execute itself. So in this particular case, my components use effect, it is not calling itself in component did update way. It is not calling itself in updation phase. So in this particular case, this is tick mark and component did update is not tick mark. So component did update is not going to work like this. Am I clear until now? I need a quick confirmation in the chat. You are able to understand, you are able to make sense like why I started class-based components first, to make you understand lifecycle methods, so that our intention was so that we can understand use effect properly. Moving a little bit forward. Now the question is, what is this dependency array? This dependency array will contain those values on which you want this use effect to be dependent on. For example, in this particular case, let me define one another state. So constant, I will define one other state called as number comma set number is equals to use state, and initially let me make it 100 or 1000 or whatever. Then I will go here and I will define an h1 in which I will simply define my number value. Now over here in this case, I will simply go and create a button, and that button will simply say minus 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 minus. Okay, and on this button I will simply go add an on click event, and over here I will simply go like this, like this, like this, and I will simply tell it set my number. What's happening? What's happening? Okay, I have implemented div here. Don't know why, how that happened. So set my number. Why is it not giving me this? Because I have implemented two curly braces. So let me implement a callback function like this, like this, like this, and let me give set number here like this, and I will simply tell set number -1. Now see, if I don't have this dependency array, at this point of time, I know it's going to behave in both ways, componentDidMount as well as componentDidUpdate. And if I right now go, it does not matter which state brings the change. Whether it's count that brings the change, effect is being called again and again. Or whether it is my number state that is sending my component to updation phase, my effect will be called again and again. And if I put an empty dependency, we know that in this particular case, my component's effect will be called only once. Now, it does not matter which state is responsible for sending it into updation, it won't be called again. Never, it will be called only once. After that, this dependency array contains the states or contains the values on which we want this use effect to be dependent on. For example, right now, I will put a value called as count. Now, if I go to this web application, I know inside this component, there are two values that are responsible for bringing the updation phase. Since in my use effect, I have implemented count as a dependency, if I go in the output, whenever my component goes to updation because of the count, you can clearly see use effect logic will be executed again and again, again and again, again and again. But if my component goes through a change, and that change is because of that particular state that is not part of my dependency, it won't call my effect. You can clearly see my component is going into updation phase, but it's not calling my effect. So if I want to make sure that use effect logic is executed on number as well, so I have to mention this number state over here inside the dependency array. And now if I go here, if I simply bring change, doesn't matter which state brings the change, my use effect is called again and again. That's what this dependency array is. I hope it makes sense. Am I clear? Do you understand all the three cases of your use effect based from the perspective of lifecycle methods? Yes or no? Yes or no? Right? So there's a third use case that we actually have of our use effect. So we will have use effect hook where we will pass callback function. We will perform logic like this, whatever logic, and then we will write our dependency. So maybe x1, x2, x3. Now I have a simple question. So you can see the dependency array here, right? I know, irrespective of whether it is dependency or whether we have a dependency, componentDidMount will always be 100% time there. So componentDidMount will always be there, no matter what. Now, in this case, componentDidUpdate is also. Let's suppose for this particular example, Inside my particular component, there are 7 values: x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, and x6. Let's suppose 6 values. Now tell me which 3 values will trigger the use effect and which 3 values won't trigger the use effect. So in this case, component did update, sorry, will happen only whenever there's a change. What's happening with my writing pad? Whenever there's a change in x1, comma x2, comma x3. I don't know what's happening with my writing pad. It's a digital pen. Something very weirdly, but you understood the topic, right? So this means that based on x1, x2, x3, now component data update will be called. So that is the first definition which we have covered with respect to use effect from the perspective of life cycle methods. So is that clear? If that is clear, we will take a break of 10 minutes now. And after 10 minutes, we are going to discuss other 3 different definitions. Although that's the only one definition, but it covers all those 3 points. So do not leave the class, because now what we are going to discuss, with respect to our use effect, that is the most important thing. You see, every single fresher who knows React, they know this particular part of use effect. So it's not a new thing. You already know these things. But I'm going to tell you some other things in today's class with respect to use effect, which you have to understand. So do not leave the class. Even in the break, stay here. Make sure you like this video, you share this video, and you subscribe if you have not already. So let's take a break of 10 minutes. Exactly after 10 minutes, we are going to start our class and we are going to discuss use effect properly. So do not leave the class. Stay here in the break as well. Ask your friends to join back so that we can start use effect again. See you guys. Bye after 10 minutes. Bye. Hey guys, hi everyone, welcome back. I hope I'm audible as well as visible. Am I? Hello guys, hi everyone, welcome back, welcome back. Come on guys, put something in the chat. Hello Ankit, hi guys, hi everyone. So is there only Ankit who is active? Where are rest of the students? Perfect, great. Okay. So I guess we can start now with our main session, with our main topic, which is use effect. We have understood one perspective of our use effect hook, and that is our life cycle method from the perspective of life cycle method. Now, there are three more points that we have to discuss: perform side effects, eliminate side effects, communicate external. Although the first sentence is not making any sense if we talk about second sentence, if we combine them. Like performing and eliminating at the same time, it does not make any sense. That's why the more definition, appropriate definition is eliminate side effects. The best use of your use effect hook, always remember, is in mounting, which means this particular use case is the best use case of use effect hook, best use case of use effect hook, when there won't be any issues, when whatever you are trying to do, it will do that, and that's it. You don't have to talk about eliminating side effects. If it is mounting, it's the best use case. Problem is that when we implement our use effect hook in this case or in this case, when our use effect hook, same logic is being executed multiple times, is being executed as many times as updation is happening, that's where effects come into picture. The question is that, sir, every single case which you have implemented here, it's written logic, over it it's written logic, over it it's written logic. So what kind of logic are we talking about? It's completely obvious that when we talk about our web applications, the logic which you think should be executed as soon as my web application starts mounts, the logic, that's what we are going to put in use effect. For example, fetching an API. That, hey, I want to fetch an API, get the data, display it in the output instantly as soon as I start my application. That is the logic that we are talking about, meaning fetching. Another logic is that as soon as my web application starts, I want to start a timer. So dealing with timers is an effect. So maybe another thing is, as soon as my web application starts, I want to perform something with which I can communicate with external world. Again, that comes back to fetching APIs, making a request, get request, or whatever requests to the APIs, right? That's something that we actually talk about in this use effect hook. But the question is, when we perform any one of the side effect, not all of them, but some of them. For example, let's suppose over here I will start a timer, or leave timer aside, I will try to set an event. DOM event. DOM manipulations is also part of an effect, which will generate an effect. See, the definition is side effect. What do we mean by side effects, guys, in real life? Leave coding aside. If anyone asks me, tell me what side effects are. Simply, when you do something, how you intended it to perform, if it performs in that way, it means there are no side effects. But whatever your intention was, it does that, but also it does something else as well. So that something else is the side effect. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And that's something that is happened with respect to whatever we are trying to do. That's never our intention. So our agenda is to eliminate that side effect. So if we are trying to perform this is what it should do. It should not do anything else. So that's what we mean by side effects, right? Let's suppose I have a simple logic over here. I will go and create a function in it. So let me simply say let my fun. So let me simply go say let my fun is equals to a function like this, which is simply supposed to print console.log subscribe. Please subscribe. Okay. After that, I will simply tell it, hey, on my document, please add an event listener. Now that event listener over there is click, which means that on the entire web page, anywhere in this web page, I simply wanted to add a click event. And when it adds that click event, I simply wanted to call my fun. Do you understand the simple logic, right? Simple logic is there that, hey, I have a simple function, and on the whole document, not on any button, not on any H1 tag, but on the whole document, which means inside this whole web application, anywhere I click, it will call this function like this. Now, I have a simple question. Think about this code, understand this code, and tell me, at this point of time, if I go in the output, do you think there will be already a click event which will be registered? Do you think that at this point of time, when my application is mounted, click event will already be registered on my document? The answer is, of course, yes, sir. Why? Because I know that irrespective of whatever my dependency array is, this logic will be executed instantly as soon as my web application is loaded. So as soon as my web application is loaded on the document, it's going to add an event which is called a click. That's why if I go on my web application, let me refresh my page. As soon as I click anywhere, you can clearly see it every single time it's calling only once, please subscribe. I'm clicking now, I'm clicking now, I'm clicking now. And every single time it's actually calling my please subscribe everywhere. Now let's understand side effect. What is our intention? Our intention is that we want there should be always one event on my every web application on this entire web application. So wherever I click, it should simply give me a message, please subscribe only once. That's what our intention is. We are performing an operational DOM event, and I want my intention is that on this whole web application, there should be an event registered. But simply, since we know how it works, as soon as I click on this, what's going to happen? As soon as I click on this, what's going to happen? It will send this whole component in updation phase. Since it will send this whole component updation phase, my use effect depends on count. And since it depends on count, it will execute this whole logic. So let's see that. So if I go here, when I click on this, you can clearly see it's calling my use effect. But when it call it again, don't you think on your document, there was already an event that was registered? On your document, there was already an event that was registered. Now it registered again. So how many events are there? 2. How many events are there? 2. That's why when I click anywhere, it's again actually printing please subscribe twice. So it's printing please subscribe twice. Now think about this scenario. Our intention was that we wanted this document add event this click only once, because maybe my intention was on this document, whenever any user clicks, it should do something. It should do something. Maybe it should give me an alert. Maybe it should do something. But only once. My intention was not to execute it multiple times. Now think about a scenario when I will go to this web application and change state multiple times. Because of course, any user can change these states any times. Maybe at this point of time, we can clearly see I have just called it 50, 60 times, which also means 50, 60 times this use effect has been called, because there is a dependency area and both these states are dependent on the use effect hook, right? Now, when I click only once, how many times it is triggering my event? How many times it's triggering my event? At least 60, 70 times, 100 times, something like that. So you can clearly see by just clicking 10, 20 times, my event has triggered itself 3,877 times. Was this what our intention? Was this our intention? No, this was not our intention. Our intention was that every single time it should only execute once. Even if calls my use effect again, but on my document, I don't want these many events to be registered. Think about this. Instead of, and I am pretty much sure it's going to hang my web application. Okay, so let me refresh my page. Let's go here, and instead of console, let's suppose we are trying to give an alert. I am trying to give an alert. Alert what? Alert subscribe. Now it's not please. Now I think I deserve a subscribe, so subscribe. Now if I go and if I simply click on this anywhere, it gives me an alert. It gives me an alert, right? You can click, it gives me an alert. But now think about this. If I again click on this continuously, if I make change, how many times it's giving me? See, it is creating a mess here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Continuously, it's giving me alerts. So that's not what our intention was. And it's obvious that's how it's going to behave, irrespective of whatever we do, because our web application depends on this count and number. Our use effect depends on it. So we need to understand that we performed an operation, it worked properly, but it also yielded a side effect. Although it's not side effect, if you ask me, because we are executing it again and again. So it is going to register those events on our document, irrespective of whatever we do. Now, what is the solution? The solution is, at this point of time, when my application is first time mounted. So when my application is first time mounted, as I said, it's going to hang my web application, because giving alerts, multiple alerts, creates mess with your web application always. Okay, perfect. Now it works. When I click on this, it is going to register it only once. When I again click on it, it's definitely going to register again. Every single time it is intended how it's working, right? Now, what do we want? We want simply a solution to it, which is when I click on it, properly fine. But when I bring the change, before it actually executes the use effect, whatever my previous use effect did, it should simply remove that. That's the solution. And then register new use effect. So every single time, whenever I do the change in the state, whatever my previous use effect did, remove that. And then register the new thing. Do you understand? And that's where the complete syntax of use effect comes into picture. This is not the complete syntax of use effect, this particular thing. No. Basically, the complete syntax of use effect is this. So we simply have use effect function, hook, it receives one first callback function like this, and over here we perform a logic. Then the same callback function returns another function. And this function is called cleanup function. Now, this is one of the very important interview questions. Hey, explain what cleanup function is. And then we can simply put another dependency, whatever, whether there's a dependency or not, it's completely up to us. But our callback function internally returns another function, and this is called cleanup function. Its intention is to remove the previous functions, to remove the previous logic, and then register new. Previous logic, and then register new. So in this particular case, what is it that we want? We want that every single time, whenever I click on this, instead of registering the use effect again, executing it again, execute it but remove the previous one. Execute again, remove the previous one. Execute again, remove the previous one. So that's what we want, and that's where our another syntax comes into picture. So over here, I will simply implement a return function. And in this case, I will write a logic that is going to nullify what my previous logic was. So in this case, I will simply tell it, hey, please remove on this document, please remove the event listener. And that event listener is click, and that click is calling my fun. Now, how does it work? At this point of time, since I have added this cleanup function, this function is called a cleanup function. Its intention is that when next time use effect is called, this will be executed first, then this is executed. So now if I go to my output here and if I refresh my page, you can clearly see every single time it's only being executed once. Even if I bring a change 100 times in the state, it does not matter. Why? Because there's a cleanup function inside this, and you can clearly see it does not matter how many times I change my state, it's still executing it only once. But how does it work? How does it work? See, this is a simple thing how it works. When my use effect is called first time, it is going to execute this code, this logic. It will be executed on my web page, whatever the logic says. And then this will also be executed. But what does it mean? It means return. Return to where? Return to the use effect where it was executed. Return is not executed immediately. Like, it does not execute over there. We know that, right? Unless we console it. We know that from the concepts of JavaScript. The return is not what will be executed for that function. So this return is being removed for the return is being returned for the next execution. So when next time you click on that count over there, the first thing that it does is it executes the previous return and then executes this logic and then returns this for the next use effect. So every single time when use effect is being called, it executes the previous return first, previous callback function first. So we can clearly see this was registering an event. Registering and click on my document. Now, next time when it's called, it's going to remove this click first, then add one. So there is one, then remove one, add one, remove one, add one, remove one, add one. What is the resultant always? Resultant is always one. So that's why we can clearly see the side effect that was there. Use effect has a complete syntax over there, and that complete syntax is we have a cleanup function associated with it. And we will write a logic in it. It is going to nullify the previous effect. It's going to implement the reverse of previous effect. Am I clear? Am I clear with the complete syntax? And if you are clear, we can clearly understand. Actually, if you ask me my definition, I don't say it's used to perform side effects, because no one would want to perform side effects. Why would we want to perform side effects? But we will perform a communication with the external. We will perform DOM manipulations. We will perform timers. We will perform fetch requests. We will perform some logic. And when we perform that, there is a chance that it might yield a side effect. To eliminate the side effect, we actually have a cleanup function. We have a cleanup function here. That's what. So that's why I do not say perform side. I say actually the point is eliminate side effects. That's one thing. Let's talk about another example here. Let me simply go. Now, can I also say that this particular side effect will only be if there is an empty, there is a dependency with some values, or there's no dependency. If it's empty dependency, will there be ever side effect? Will there be ever side effect? In first case, that's what's going to happen. But for next cycle, previous return will be executed first, then use effect. There won't be an effect. Why? Because it will be called only once. It will be called in mounting. It will never be called, irrespective of how many chains you do in this state. It will never be called. I hope that makes sense. Let's see another example. Let me get back my, what is this called, count and all those things. Let me remove this logic. Although, let's do one thing. Let me remove this much of code here. And what I will do is there's a function that I have, and I will start a timer. Okay. Let's suppose I will simply say set interval here. And this set interval is simply supposed to call fun after every second. This is supposed to, not after every second. Let's implement, create big timer called as 4 seconds. Or maybe a smaller than this, which is 3 seconds. And now let's go here and let's see. So if I refresh my page right now, since it's executed in mounting, it will after every 3 seconds, it will implement. There's no need of that in the empty dependency case, Ubaid, right? There's no need of that, right? Because we don't want to clear anything in that case. That's why I said now before we started cleanup function, I told you the problem lies in when we actually pass the dependency array values or when we don't pass anything. Because when we don't pass any second argument, in that case also it will be executed on every update. When this is the best case scenario. I started with that statement, if you remember it. Right? Now see, right now, since according to my logic, I am telling it to execute please subscribe after every 3 seconds, it's properly working right now. After every 3 seconds, it's giving me please subscribe, please subscribe, please subscribe. Why? Because at this point of time, useEffect is being executed and there's only one timer that is associated with this whole web application. But think about it. When I click on this, useEffect will be called these many times. So these many timers will be registered on my web application. And every timer will actually execute after every 3 seconds. Now see, do you think it's happening 3 seconds? Yes, it's happening 3 seconds, after 3 seconds. But there are too many timers right now and you are not able to find the difference. Execution cycle of what? Of what? Isko, kiska. So you can clearly see right now, after every 3 seconds, it's properly displaying please subscribe. But there are too many timers that are simultaneously right now running. Too many timers that are simultaneously running. So can we say this is a side effect that we have? We do not want these many timers to be registered on any web application. So that's why what we will do is we will actually implement a cleanup function on it. We will tell it, hey, implement a cleanup function. So we will simply go tell it to return. Return what? Return a function like this. And over here, I will simply store this in a variable called as interval, let's suppose, is equals, and I will simply tell it, whenever this useEffect is called again, make sure you clear the interval first. So clear the interval of my interval. We have an interval function, right? Clear interval. So now if I go here, if I go in the output, irrespective of how many times I call it, you can clearly see my please subscribe is still working the same way. Why? Because every single time, whenever useEffect is executed, it runs the cleanup function first, then executes the logic. Cleanup function first, then executes the logic. Cleanup function first, then executes the logic. Which means every single time it's starting a new timer, clearing the previous timer and returning the new timer. So that's what we mean by cleanup functions. That is the whole syntax of useEffect hook. I hope this makes sense. Am I clear? Do we understand this? Yes or no? Now let's talk about a real example of our useEffect hook. Real life example. Like, why will I use useEffect hook? And why is it too important in our web application? Let's understand that. Because until now, we have been just understanding the conceptual point of view. We have been understanding the concept, what useEffect is, and its different use cases. Let's suppose I have an API. Okay. And how many of you know what API is? Let's suppose this is the API that I'm going to use. How many of you, what is an API? Application Programming Interface. So if you do not have an idea of what APIs are and how do we fetch data out of it, what promises are, I would definitely suggest to you to go. There's one video that I have uploaded on JavaScript on promises, where we talked about what these APIs are and how do we fetch data out of it. Send in chat. Let me share it in the chat as well. So this is the API that we have. Okay, let's talk about it. First of all, let's define API again. Okay, let's define API again. Although I have given you very good examples of what APIs are used for. Application Programming Interface. Simply, it's an interface that is going to connect two businesses, you can say. That's why APIs were created. So APIs are some endpoints where we have a lot of data created in a same format, and we simply try to fetch data out of it. For example, later on, since we are going to work with Node.js, right now I am creating a website. I have been working on this for last 3 days. I am creating a website for variable verse. Okay, think about this example. This is what we need to understand. And over there, I try to create a lot of database collections for student, for attendance, for classes, for all those things. I created different collections. Now, the point is that later on, maybe one of you are going to register on that particular web application. You will go to attendance. Now, when you go to attendance, over there, it should give you attendance of all of those students who are joining these classes. And whenever you have been present, it should mark present to this. And whenever you have been marked absent, it should mark absent to this. But where is this data stored? It is stored somewhere else, right? It is stored in another server, in database server that I have, right? Now, in my front end, I want to access this data. This data is stored somewhere else. And that somewhere else is database, which is backend. So this backend developer has to make sure that I will build an API over here in the backend. I will build an endpoint in the backend so that the same endpoint will be given to front-end developer, and front-end developer will make a request to this in a way so that it will be easy for that front-end developer to fetch data out of it based on the requirement. Now, another very important point. Now, what was the requirement of front-end developer? Getting attendance. Do you think in this API, front-end developer is looking for password of a user? No. So it's always limited data. Whatever data you are required, you are in requirement of, that is the data that I'm going to put in this API, but in a same format always. It's not like in one case I'm going to give you 3 key value pairs in one object, in another case 4 key value pairs. No, it's a proper formatted data. But this formatted data is stored somewhere, and our intention from front end is that we will make a request to this data point, and we will simply access it so that I can make my business running. I can make my web application running. I can fetch the data that I want. That's what APIs are used for. Am I clear? Am I clear? Real life example. Although I have made a proper video around it, I have properly explained like how it is created and how it is created, how it is fetched, how data works properly. We have done that. Now someone is asking, sir, how to create a custom API. That's what we are going to learn in the backend now. In the backend, we will create those APIs. We will have to design our backend in a way. We will have to keep parameters, all the things in our mind. And that's what we will do in our backend classes. When we start our Node.js, over there, our most important concept and agenda would be to create data points, endpoints of our own. Right? I hope this makes sense. Now, similarly, you can see there is this endpoint. Now, on this endpoints over there, I will simply click enter. Now, when I click enter, what does it mean? Always remember, whenever you type a URL over there, it means I am trying to make a GET request, GET, GET request on this endpoint. GET request means give me the content that you hold. There are multiple types of requests that you can make on an endpoint if that endpoint supports it. GET, POST, put, patch, delete, a lot of other update, and every single request serves its own purpose. Maybe on this particular endpoint, your intention was to create some data. In that case, you will simply post. Maybe on this endpoint, you had the credentials with the help of which you can delete the data. You will implement delete request. So there are a lot of requests that you can implement. Now, over here, with respect to your browser, whenever you type in a URL, click enter, automatically it makes a GET request. And we can confirm that as well. If you go to network over there, simply click on this, click enter. You can clearly see on this random joke API, I am making a GET request over here. So browsers are capable of making GET requests. So how do we make post requests? We implement forms. We implement all of those things. Functions, right? Moving forward. Now, this is the API that we have here. And on this API, whenever you make a GET request, you can clearly see every single time I am getting a joke. Every single time a new joke. But there's one thing which is common, which is every single time it's returning me the same object. By same object, I mean same format. Only 4 keys. It's not going to return anytime 2 keys only. Every single time 4 keys. So let's go through a joke. What is the least spoken language in the world? The punchline is sign language. So these are some jokes, some weird jokes. Sometimes I do not understand these jokes, but it's a good API that we can test on our web application and create a web application. Now, leave useEffect aside. I'm going to go here and I'm going to cut this whole code out and put it inside my app.txt somewhere here. Get back to my app.js, RFC. Now, in this case, I will simply go and talk about a button. And that button will simply say generate jokes. Okay. And on this particular button, I will simply implement on click and I will call my function handle, or instead of saying handle, let me say generate joke. And then I will define a function called as generate joke like this. And this function is simply supposed to fetch the joke out of that endpoint. Now we know browsers are capable of making GET request on its own and get data out of it. But how can we, as a code, fetch the data out of any endpoint? We use a web API called as fetch method itself. So I will simply copy this. I will simply copy this here and I will go to my function and I will simply implement fetch. Now in this fetch over there, I will simply paste it. And if you do not write any other argument to it, it automatically means make a GET request on it. We can make using the fetch method, we can make post request, we can make put request, we can make any type of request. For that, we simply pass another argument and over here we write method over there is equals to what is equals to post like this and so on and so forth. But as of now, we since have to do only GET request, so I will keep it like this. Now, whenever we implement fetch, let me try to store it in a variable. So let my data is equals to fetch this. And then I will simply go and implement console.log data. If I go now over here and if I try to go on this, you can clearly see it returns me an object in which the data is pending. It returns me a promise actually. Data is pending. So what do we mean by promise? Promises are nothing but when you perform some operations, in that particular case, we simply get sometimes a promise, which is a data structure kind of thing. And our intention is that if the data is successfully fetched out of it, do this. We simply associate asynchronous handler state, asynchronous callback state. So promises allows us both things. If we get the data, do this. If we don't, do that. And there's a proper video on promises as well. I would definitely request you, if you want to become a very good developer, not just a front end, not just a back end. In back end, promise is used. In front end, promise used. 80% of things are done by promises. That's why in every single interview, the first question they want to ask is, what is a promise? Explain promise. Create a promise. So make sure you watch that video. Someone please put the video number in the chat so that it can help you. I think 26 or 27 number is the promise, where we have discussed. But at this point of time, let me give you a very basic analogy. When we try to make a request on this, are we 100% sure that we will always get the data, guys? Are we 100% sure that we will get the data out of it? No, we are not. And do we know that how much time it's going to take to get the data out of it? No, we are not. So in these kind of operations, when there's an ambiguity, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, for example, you type an email inside the login. You type password. You click on login. Now, do you know how much time it's going to take to authenticate you? No. Do you know whether you will be authenticated or not? No. So because there are a lot of parameters that go in the behind the scenes, right? So in these cases, we have a data structure to handle to properly handle such scenarios called as promise. Now we in advance we write it, we tell it, if it gives me, if the promise is fulfilled, like promise in real life is fulfilled, then do this. If promise is not fulfilled, it's rejected, then catch the error. If promise is fulfilled, then do this. If promise is not fulfilled, whatever the error is, catch the error. Now, when we implement this, if it does not work, it won't throw an it won't crash my application. Why? Because I'm ready for both situations. I'm ready for solving the promise as well. I'm ready for catching the error as well. So that's why inside this data variable, I will simply implement some small analogy. I will tell it data. If this data, the data I have, if it is resolved, on that I will use a then keyword. This then receives a callback function as an argument. So this then in turn receives whatever you want to pass. I will pass a result. Now, whatever this promise was supposed to return, if it returns that, it goes in the argument called as the argument of callback function of dot then, in this case result. So let me simply say console.log a result. So now if I go in the output, if I try to go and check the console, we know by default it was promise pending, and now if we generate the joke, you can clearly see we got the response. We got an object out of it. Remember earlier, we also got the same object, but it was pending. Now inside the same object, there are multiple key value pairs. Whenever we use fetch method, remember when we try to resolve the first promise, the first callback function is not going to give you the desired result. That's why we have to parse it. Because if you look at the output that we have here, when we try to fetch the data, you can clearly see this is not a JavaScript object, it's a JSON object, JSON entity. That's why I will go to async await as well, Ubed. So over here, you can clearly see it's a JSON entity. Do we all agree? Is this a JavaScript object or JSON object? Is it a JSON object or JavaScript? It's a JSON object. And over here, the response that we got is something else. We did not got this response. That's why the result it returns over there, this result that it returns, over here, we have to tell it to implement JSON on it. So I will simply tell result.json, which means we have to parse it. And now if I try to console this result.json, it will again return a promise. So even let me not implement return directly. I will simply say console.log. Sorry. So I will simply say console.log, and then I will simply pass this JSON.json as a console. And if I right now go to the output, we can clearly see even when I implemented .json, it again returns a promise. Now we also received a promise in data, and to resolve that, we implemented .then. Similarly, when this result.json is implemented here, we know that it returns a promise. Now to resolve that, what is the keyword that I will use? Again on .then on it. And now over here, I will again pass the same scenario, which is a callback function. So I will pass a response to it. And over here, let me simply say console.log what my response is. So now if I go to my output here, and if I refresh my page, when I click on generate jokes, you can clearly see we got the same object that we got in the browser when we made a get request. Type setup punchline ID. You can see ID punchline setup type. Same things over there. So we can clearly say in this particular case, this response hold is the data. This endpoint actually returns the data that we are interested in. So now we have to store it. So let me store it in a state. So I will simply say constant data set my data is equals to use state, and by default, let me make it by default an object. Since it's an object, so let me make it object. And over here, when this promise is resolved, I will simply tell set my data to what? The response. So now can I say this state hold is the whole object? Of course, yes. So now let me go here and I will simply say h1. And in this h1, I will simply talk about setup, because there are two keys that we are interested in. So number one is data.setup. Let me see the key name. So it should be data.setup and punchline. So let me simply go say data.setup and then Control C, Control V. I will go talk about punchline here. And let me simply say data.punchline. If there is any issue, see, we got the response from this API. Now I want to display the setup and punchline in my web application when I click on button. And I know when I click on button over there, I am calling a function called as generate joke. So immediately it will make a request on this and update my state data with the response. It's very obvious. I cannot access response here. It has a functional scope, but I'm updating my state there so that now state can be accessed anywhere. That's why I'm using state. Do you understand that? I cannot use response. I cannot implement response or setup here because it's a functional scope. I cannot use it outside this function, but I can use data anywhere. I can use this state anywhere. That's why I update my state with the response. Now I will write data.setup, I will write data.punchline. Now if I go to my output, to my web application, and if I refresh my page, click on generate jokes, we can clearly see we have a joke here. Why do bees have sticky here? Because they use honeycombs. Okay, so that's kind of a joke that it's using, but we are able to fetch the data. Now, where is the use effect logic here? Why do we want to use use effect? That's something that we are here for. I was not here for to fetch this data. I'm here to make you understand why use effect comes into picture. Think about the scenario. Think about the scenario. Right now, when I refresh my page, at this point of time, you can clearly see setup and punchline is empty. Do you think this looks cool? Don't you think that generate jokes will generate every single time a new joke? I don't have any issues with it. But as soon as my page refreshes, don't you think in front of such setup and punchline there should be already a joke? There should be already a joke, right? It completely makes sense. There should be already a joke because we would have scenarios when as soon as my application is mounted, it should do something. In that particular case, I will use use effect hook. So what am I going to do? I'm simply going to go over here, implement my use effect hook. And then I will simply tell it, inside this use effect hook, please do one thing. You will call my generate joke function here, but you will call it in mounting phase only because that's what our requirement in this case was. And now if I go and refresh my page here, so if I refresh my page, it's already there. So when I refresh my page, you can clearly see it's already there. So now it looks cool. And there are hundreds of scenarios, thousands of scenarios when you will implement your use effect in this manner. So do we now understand the use of use effect hook? Yes or no? Do we understand the use of use effect hook? Yes or no? Give me a quick confirmation. Now this is very simple example. In our next class, we will see very big example of it. We will create a small web application around one of the API, small news API that we use. We will use the same thing, but I'm not going to teach you how to create a news app. I'm going to teach you why use effect is important, mandatory. I hope this makes sense. Another very simple example here. Let's talk about our, what is this called? Amazon.in. Okay. I know that it's going to fetch APIs in the mounting phase. So in this case, I will use effect hook. I'm not saying that this Amazon is created with help of React. I'm just giving you some analogies. That's it. Now, over think about this. When I click on L, do you think it's supposed to do something? Do you think it's supposed to do something as soon as I type L? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? When I write A, it does something. When I write P, it does something. When I T, it does something. When I O, it does something. Now think about, compare it with the React that we have. Compare it with the React. This is my value state. Remember two-way data binding that we discussed in our previous class? In our previous class, two-way data binding. I know if I have to implement such functionality in my React, I will make the value inside this state, then I will use onChange event on it. Then the same state I will pass as a dependency here. So same state, whatever my input field is, I will pass a dependency. What does that mean? That means whenever there's a change inside the input field of this search bar, call my generate joke. Whenever there's a change, call my generate joke. Whenever there's a change, call my generate joke. That's very, 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 very good example of it. Very good example of it. And this is the most fantastic example of use effect hook. Although we will do such thing in our next class. I hope this makes sense. Am I clear? Am I clear? Now, talking about, leave these topics. I think we have discussed enough for today. सर जैसे जोमेटो की एपीआई हम नेटवर्क से निकाल लेते हैं, बट अदर वेबसाइट्स लाइक अमेजॉन, फ्लिपकार्ट पे भी चीज पॉसिबल नहीं होता है. ऐसे क्यों? जैसे जोमेटो की एपीआई हम नेटवर्क से निकाल लेते हैं, but other website like Amazon, Flipkart पे वही चीज possible नहीं होती है. What do you mean? Okay, do you mean like if I go to this Amazon like this, inspect here, if I go to my network and if I try to make a refresh, I won't see anything here. No, you can see a lot of things. You can see how many things you can see. A lot of things here as well. It depends. It depends on whether you want to make that visible or not. We use hooks for borrowing features from class. We use hooks for implementing such. We are not borrowing anything from class-based components, but we have created hooks to implement such functionalities. No, in class-based components, we don't have anything like that. You can see over here as well, we have a lot of data that we are accessing. There are some data that we can hide maybe. It's completely up to the developer. Rohit. Okay, I was discussing something else. See, I think there are a lot of students. I want you guys to put something in the chat. Who here has watched all the classes until now in React? Or who here is that who is completely comfortable with HTML, CSS, JavaScript until now? Let's discuss that assignment. I don't see there's any issue with that assignment, but let's discuss that. First of all, me. We will discuss 10 minutes related to assignment as well, Obad. Yes. I think. So all of the students must put yes or me, because now it's time to get serious. There are students who have been following this entire batch from day one, or even if you have joined in React or JavaScript, but you know things, right? Now the question is that we have to implement all those things that we have learned, right? It's not just about getting ready for interviews. It's also about creating good projects as well. So I am going to create 5 groups now. Group of 5 members, maybe, or 4 members. Then we will work on good projects. I have 5 projects in my mind, 5 ideas in my mind that can be later on converted into proper businesses as well. Okay, but even if it's not converted into businesses, but we will have still good projects on our resume. So do one thing, create groups of 5. I want only 8 groups. I don't want anything else. I know there are only around 35 to 40 students who are very serious. I don't want to include anyone else in those. Then all those 8 groups are going to work on projects. As of now, you will work on front end only. And also with those projects, it's not just like I will give you a statement and you will work projects. No, we will work like a team. I will take continuous updates. I will give you suggestions. You have any doubts, you will reach out to me. And that's how it's going to be. Like a company environment. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Although I know that it's completely free and I want to do it completely free. I want to mentor you properly, like how it's mentored in companies. Okay. So that's what we are going to do. You can use Tailwind. Instead of using Bootstrap, React supports Tailwind properly, and let's use Tailwind. I will give you one class on Tailwind someday. Okay, use Tailwind. I use Tailwind. I have to create variable verse application. I'm using Tailwind right now. I don't use normal CS right now, but definitely in past 3 years, I have been using continuously CSS, proper CSS. But if you want to learn it, you should use proper CSS. But if you want to create projects, then use Tailwind. Now let me get back to what I was discussing. Create 8 groups of 5 members. Probably based on the city. Don't merge different city people. Let's use, for example, if there are 5 people from Delhi, create a group of Delhi people only, create a group of Jammu people only, create a group of Mumbai people, create a group of Kashmir people. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Right? So do that. I will maybe share a strategy that will allow us to create groups in a proper manner. But once we create a group, you have to work on those. It's not like, sir, I have some work, I will do this. You have to be very serious for next 4 and 5. Let's make diverse groups as well, but the projects that I have in mind, they are related to something like their own cities, maybe. Right? None from my place. In that case, you can join my individual groups of Jada. Don't worry about it. Or let's make diverse groups. Let's make something. It's group choices are irrelevant. Whatever you want, you can do that. But I want at least 8 groups. Okay. And let's come up with a strategy to create group properly, then I will assign you proper projects. As of now, we will create front end. Meanwhile, we complete our front end. तब तक यहाँ से हमने we might have started already our back end as well, and then we will create back end accordingly, and we will merge it and create a very big project out of it. Am I clear? Am I clear? Manash, don't worry about it. If there's no one from Assam, there are two people from Assam, by the way, Surjodoy and Manash. Sir, can we talk? Sir, both problem mein hu. Can we talk? Please text me on my WhatsApp. I will give you a call, Basu. Don't worry about it. I know there are 35 students. I have the names as well, Ubaid. 35 students are very serious from day one. Okay, guys, so we will do that, and we will work on projects from the React perspective as of now, and then we will link it with our backend, and that will be a very fantastic project. Okay, so that's what we are going to do in coming week. We will at least create groups first of all, and then we will see what we can do. First of all, let me share the attendance link. I almost forgot. So this is the attendance. That's the plan, Ubaid. That's what we will do. Let me first of all document few things from my side. Project में खाली React ही use होगा, Najm. Only React as of now. Nothing else. React, Tailwind, CSS, HTML. That's it. We won't use anything else. Only React, because the projects that we'll be creating is MERN projects. We won't be using any other stack. MERN. That's it. Okay. Do we have any questions, guys? So I pasted the link. Please make sure. So I'm a MERN dev with a beginner level project, but I cannot seem to catch the full concept of hooks, other useEffect and ref and callback. So what we can do is mind scope. Like, I'm seeing you first time, first of all. In this, are you a member of this group of you? Are you a member of this batch? If you are not, and if you are serious about it, we, as I said, I'm creating groups. You can join that, but only if you are serious. If you are not, in that case, unfortunately, I cannot help. But if you are serious and you want to work on real projects, you want to work properly, then definitely we can do something related to that. Okay. How do I will create the group. I will try to filter out 5 groups, and then I will start a poll, Okiyama, and then we will see how many groups can be created, and then I will assign the projects. I will have an individual meet with every group on Google Meet or somewhere else. Okay. Your first time, in that case, please join our WhatsApp group, and let me see how we can help. Okay, na? I think we are good with our today's class. So let me Mindscope. Let me share the WhatsApp link if you need it. Allow me a second. So this is the WhatsApp group. Yes, I'm sharing the link. Please join it, but only if you are serious. If you are not, then you can join the YouTube channel only. Okay. Any other questions, guys? One last request, please make sure that you put a valuable comment after the class is done, because whatever conversation we are right now doing, it's not visible in the comment sections later on. So please make sure that you put a valuable comment once this class is done, and you share this batch, you share this video with different people. We need few more subscribers for 1800. I think that might have already happened. Maybe not. Let me see. So we need 2 more subscribers for 1800, right? Although that's a very small number, but still an achievement. So thank you so much, guys. See you in the next class. Till then, please make sure that you practice continuously. I will upload an assignment, and with respect to assignment, we will have a doubt session. Maybe this Thursday we will have a doubt session, and over there we will discuss both the assignments. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Please make sure you mark the attendance, and see you in the next class. Thank you so much. Have a great week ahead, and see you. Bye. Thank you so much. Bye. You too, Amit. Bye. Thank you so much, Alkan. Bye.